Your Honor, my client is entitled to 50% of her company, the estate, and $2 million in alimony for emotional distress, my husband's attorney announced, a smug smile plastered across his face. My ex, Mark, sat right beside him, grinning like he'd already won the lottery. He leaned over the polished wooden table and whispered, "You should have signed the prenup when you had the chance, Sarah. Now you're going to fund my life with my new girlfriend." I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at my lawyer and gave a subtle nod. Your Honor, my attorney stepped forward, holding a thick, brown legal casing. Before you render your final judgment, we respectfully request the court unseal envelope number 3. Welcome back to BT Revenge Tales, where greed always meets its match. Today, I'm going to tell you how my arrogant husband tried to strip me of everything I built, and how a single brown envelope ruined his life forever. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and for the past 7 years, I believed I was building a life with my soulmate. I'm a self-made entrepreneur, having built a digital logistics firm from a cramped garage into a multi-million-dollar company through relentless 80-hour work weeks. When I met Mark, he was a charming, smooth-talking artist who promised to be my rock. He claimed he didn't care about my money, only my heart. But words are cheap, and actions always reveal the truth. While I sacrificed sleep to grow my empire, Mark slowly slipped into a life of luxury on my dime, offering nothing in return except empty promises about his next big breakthrough. I ignored the subtle red flags for years because I loved him. But around our 6-year anniversary, the cracks became impossible to hide. Unexplained bank withdrawals began appearing, and Mark grew distant, constantly guarding his phone. I wanted to believe he was just stressed, but a gut feeling told me something sinister was taking root under my own roof. I kept quiet, watching, waiting, and preparing for whatever truth was about to surface. The truth didn't just hurt. It completely shattered my reality. Through a private investigator, I discovered Mark wasn't working late on his art projects. He was living a lavish double life with a 24-year-old named Chloe. Worst of all, he wasn't just paying for expensive dinners and overseas vacations. He was actively embezzling money from my logistics company. Over 18 months, Mark had secretly funneled over $600,000 into offshore accounts registered under Chloe's name. He was draining my life's work to fund his new fantasy. When I finally confronted him and served him with divorce papers, there was no shame, no apology, and no remorse in his eyes. Instead, he threw his head back and laughed right in my face. "You think you're so smart, Sarah," he sneered, leaning in close. "My high-powered lawyers are going to prove I was the mastermind behind your business. I'm taking half your company, half your fortune, and you're going to pay me alimony for the rest of your life." Mark expected me to scream, cry, or throw a hysterical fit right then and there. But I gave him none of that. Instead, I let my eyes well up with tears, lower my head, and pretended to be completely broken. I wanted him to believe he had crushed me. His massive ego swallowed the bait instantly, making him wildly overconfident and dangerously careless. While Mark spent the next few weeks bragging to his friends about the fortune he was about to inherit, I was operating silently in the shadows. I hired a top-tier forensic accountant who spent sleepless nights tracing every single cent Mark had stolen from my corporate accounts. My legal team carefully compiled a mountain of undeniable digital evidence, bank statements, and wire transfer logs. We organized everything into 3 distinct, sealed legal envelopes. Envelopes 1 and 2 contained the standard financial paperwork for court. But envelope number 3 held the nuclear option, the definitive proof that would completely dismantle Mark's entire world. The morning of our divorce hearing, Mark strutted into the courtroom wearing a tailored suit I had bought him, flanked by his expensive legal team. Chloe sat in the front row of the gallery, flashing me a smug, triumphant smirk. Mark took the witness stand first, putting on an Oscar-worthy performance. With a trembling voice, he painted himself as the devoted, hard-working husband who had sacrificed his own artistic career to build my logistics company. He looked the judge dead in the eye, raised his right hand, and swore under oath that every single dollar transferred to his name was a legitimate, authorized business investment. He even claimed he had injected $200,000 of his own personal inheritance into my startup during its early days, a complete, fabricated lie designed to justify his claim to half my fortune. Sitting at the defense table, I watched him commit outright perjury with absolute coldness in his eyes. Mark genuinely believed his lies were flawless, completely unaware that every single false word coming out of his mouth was digging his financial and legal grave deeper by the second. The judge flipped through the initial financial binders submitted by Mark's attorney, his brow furrowing deeper with every turned page. For an agonizing few moments, absolute silence hung in the courtroom. When the judge finally looked up, his expression was grave. Based on the preliminary documentation presented by the petitioner, the judge announced, his voice echoing off the walls, Mr. Mark appears to have a colorable claim to joint business assets and temporary spousal support. My heart plummeted into my stomach, exactly as planned for the performance. Mark turned toward the gallery and gave Chloe a subtle wink. He leaned over toward my defense table, a cruel, mocking sneer spreading across his face. I told you I'd take everything, Sarah, he whispered under his breath, his voice dripping with venom. You should have just given me what I asked for. To anyone watching, it looked like Mark had completely won, and my empire was about to be ripped away. Before the judge could sign the preliminary order, my lawyer stood up calmly. Your Honor, before you render your decision, we respectfully request the court unseal envelope number 3. The judge nodded, slicing open the thick brown casing. Inside lay the forensic audit, full wire transfer trails, and certified bank records proving Mark never contributed a single cent of inheritance. Even worse, it contained time-stamped audio recordings of Mark explicitly explaining how he was stealing my money to fund Chloe's offshore accounts. The temperature in the room instantly dropped to freezing. The judge's eyes narrowed into slits as he glared down at Mark. Mr. Mark, the judge boomed, his voice terrifyingly cold. Did you just lie under oath to a federal court? Mark's face drained of all color, turning a ghost-like white. His expensive lawyer grabbed the documents, skimmed through the undeniable evidence, and turned utterly pale. Recognizing the sheer scale of the perjury and fraud, Mark's lawyer turned to the judge and declared, Your Honor, I am immediately withdrawing as counsel for this client. Mark was left sitting alone, completely defenseless as his entire illusion collapsed. The judge slammed his gavel with a thunderous crack that echoed through the courtroom. Your claims are dismissed with prejudice, Mr. Mark. You get 0 alimony, 0 property, and every cent transferred offshore will be seized immediately. Before Mark could even open his mouth to beg, the judge signaled 2 armed bailiffs at the door. Arrest this man for fraud and felony perjury. Chloe gasped in horror, practically knocking over her chair as she fled the courtroom to save herself, completely abandoning him. As the officers slapped metal handcuffs onto Mark's trembling wrists, I stood up, walked right past him, and leaned in close. You thought you were living off my fortune, Mark, I whispered with a cold, calm smile. Now you'll be living off prison food.